welcome back to Interior Design Community. We're here for our chat with a very special guest today, and I have one of our social media moderators in to talk a little bit about our guest. Leslie, please introduce our very, very famous and fantastic person.
It is my pleasure. Hi, everybody. It is my pleasure to introduce to you Jerry Cohen. Jerry is a longtime friend. He is my personal lawyer. For any of you that know Libby Langdon, he negotiated her contract with Walmart. He is also Leslie Hendricks Wood's lawyer. And Jerry is the top lawyer in the home furnishings industry for all things related to licensing and furniture. His law firm is Cohen, Towers, Beback, and Wagner. They're on Lexington in New York City. Jerry is also a yogi. He is one heck of a nice guy. And we are so thankful and appreciative, Jerry, for you joining us today.
Thank you. Thank you, Laurie and Leslie.
I know no one wants to hear us, so we want to hear you, Jerry, and everything that you have to share with us today about licensing.
So, Jerry, tell us a little bit about, you know, if someone wants to come in, they want to do licensing. You've been doing this for 30 years. What is the very first thing you need to consider when you have a brand coming to you and they want to give you this opportunity?
Well, I think you have to first think about what your goals are, because licensing can be very rewarding, but you have to understand that it's going to take a lot of time, patience, energy, and passion, to make it work. You're going to be designing the product. You're going to be working with the manufacturer and collaborating with the manufacturer and so forth. So your expectations have to be very realistic. Knowing that it's going to take a lot of work to make it happen. So know, first of all, what's your goal?
Right. And then don't get, I would assume that there are a lot of people who get really, really flattered. They have this big brand, they're envisioning this big, huge reward financially coming to them. What do you suggest they need to do immediately? They've got this opportunity. They're probably really, really excited. They're thinking about the big numbers and some revenue streams that are going to come in. What should they immediately see an attorney, or does that sometimes change the way the brands think of them? If they do, how do you think that they should proceed?
Well, we see a lot of especially young designers or designers who are just jumping into licensing, getting very excited and flattered about being approached by a manufacturer or a Wayfair or some other type of manufacturer and so forth. And I think that you have to really step back and understand that, yes, you need them, but they're also approaching you for a purpose. They want you as well. So I wouldn't just jump into any agreement. I think it's very, very important that you make sure that you're not being taken advantage of, that the terms of the agreement are standard and so forth. And we can get into some of the standard provisions. I think Leslie had some experience with some designers who had maybe jumped in too quickly into a deal.
Okay, yeah, that's perfect segue. Leslie, tell us a little bit about some of these deals that you've seen go maybe a little bit, the way that it wasn't as financially, beneficial to the designer.
Of course, these deals didn't happen for me, but just friends of mine who were very flattered, of course, to be asked by different manufacturers to work with them on a licensing partnership. It was the first time they've been asked, and in 2 cases, they were so flattered that they did not want or did not bother to, hire a lawyer. Because they both felt that doing that would, quote, turn off the gentleman in both cases who owned the companies that they were involved with. And that's something that I think we as women, especially, and men too, watching this, need to be aware of, that we need to stand up for ourselves and always have a licensing contract. And what happens is that when you start, in both of these cases, when money started flowing because their designs were great, which is why they were approached in the first place, it gets very sticky about negotiating deal terms after your name, your brand, your energy has been invested in a deal, and then you have the person out here sort of holding the financial pot saying, well, we'll pay you now and we'll do this, and you really don't have any power anymore when you give it all up at front. Jerry, what would you add to that or say to that?
No, I would absolutely agree with you. I think it's very important to have these types of agreements in writing. There's sometimes a lot of money flowing, and there are a lot of obligations on both sides, which we'll talk about in a few moments. So it's important that people know what to expect from each other.
It's like your mom always told you, they're not going to buy the cow if they get the milk for free, right? So you have to be careful about all of the different provisions. Now, you've spoken about some of the provisions, and it really opened my eyes because it's stuff I wouldn't have considered that are really, really important. So tell us about some of the details that you put into these contracts.
Okay, so the first thing you want to think about is the foundation of the agreement, and some of these agreements can be very simple, 5 pages or so, and some of them can be as long as 60 pages or more. And I mentioned to some people that there's actually a very detailed agreement online. It's a Martha Stewart agreement that's public information, and it'll show you all the bells and whistles that can go into a very complicated agreement. Every provision is important, but the first one you'd have to think about is the building block is what are you licensing, and why are you licensing it? And you want to make sure that you're licensing a certain product to the right licensee. For example, if a case good manufacturer wants to enter upholstery, are you going to get into bed with that manufacturer? The good thing is that he wants to open up a new line and is excited about it and will give you attention. The downside is he has no idea how to manufacture or promote upholstery. So you have to make sure that you have the right product to the right licensee. And the way you can do that is you can segment a product category. For example, upholstery is chairs, or it could be sofas and love seats. It could be all those three, or each one of them individually. Lighting is a very broad category. Is it chandeliers? Is it sconces? Is it everything? So you have to sort of marry the product and design to the right licensee who can best promote the product. Or a third way is you can actually just have a specific design itself that you'll attach as a spec to the exhibit, to the agreement. So now you're saying, these are the products that you, licensee, will produce and market for me and pay me a royalty. So the first thing is know what you're licensing.
Okay, that's a really good first step. But then you have to know what you're licensing. You also probably have to be pretty realistic about the expectations of finances. I mean, we did cover that a lot of people think it's going to be hugely financially rewarding, that they're going to be in Targets everywhere, and that they're going to be rolling in money. And that's not necessarily the case, but it can be a building block. And I think that you've talked a little bit about that. Tell us what you've maybe seen in the industry, 30 years now, going to High Point, 30 years representing designers getting these licensing deals. What have you seen happen where someone could start at a smaller deal and then work their way up?
Yeah, so I think that's very true. I think that you have to start somewhere, and licensing, like every other endeavor, you build up credibility slowly with one manufacturer, which it's a good segue to another manufacturer. It's a very small industry, so when one manufacturer sees you have credibility, they want to jump in with you as well. So as a designer, we usually start with a smaller project, and when we're talking about what they can expect from the manufacturer, usually a standard royalty, the compensation part of the deal, is, I'd say, about 5% is an average royalty that someone will get, a commission, so to speak, on sales. On the low side, it's 4%. On the high side, it's 6%. This is mostly furniture, because on accessories and lighting, you might see 7% or 8%. Because the profit margins are a little fatter and the price point's a little smaller. So the royalty is a little bit higher. But 5% on furniture, maybe 7% or 8% or so on accessories and lighting. And that's on that.
Right. So they're not going to make a lot of money on the first deal, which leads me to most of the time. But that leads me to ask about this in the contract. And I would think that a lot of people don't think about this. Does it limit them from working sometimes with other manufacturers?
Well, a licensing agreement can limit you in a sense, because don't forget, you're licensing a product exclusively or category exclusively to one manufacturer. So if that manufacturer is not selling your product, or if it's on the shelf, then yes, now you're excluded from from designing that product category, for example, upholstery or chairs or whatever, to another better licensee. So you have to be very careful about who you get into bed with. This is true.
Right.
To speak to your point earlier, a little bit earlier, about you're making that royalty on net sales. Can you talk about that a little bit more and what that means?
Sure. So net sales is the amount that a manufacturer invoices to the end user, be it a customer or be a retailer. And so it's very important that you get paid a royalty on the amount that's invoiced rather than amount that's collected by the manufacturer. So I'll explain that. There are net sales, the sale amount. The manufacturer will exclude certain standard exclusions, for example, freight, taxes, returns, and maybe volume discounts. And that's as far as it goes. Any bad debt, for example, is the manufacturer's problem. So the designer should be paid a royalty on the amount invoiced by the manufacturer to the third party.
So let's talk about that for a second. So let's say that Lori's a designer, and she's designed a collection of upholstery, and so the manufacturer takes that to High Point and has it on their floor, and net sales is at a wholesale level, correct, Terry?
Yeah, yes, it's amount invoiced. So it would be to a retailer, it would be a wholesale, yes.
Correct. So from the designer standpoint, they're getting paid on wholesale net sales, right?
On invoiced amount net sales, correct.
Invoiced amount net sales. So let's say that a retailer then comes in, and let's say after market, there's been $250,000 worth of net sales. And then the manufacturer invoices that to the retailer, and they invoice that when, Jerry, when it ships or when they actually buy it? When does the invoicing happen?
It's usually when it's shipped.
Okay, so let's say that they have new product introductions. They haven't made a decision yet as to whether or not those new product introductions are really going to stick or not, because they're waiting to see if there's been uptake by the retailers, right?
Correct.
And so then the new product introductions, okay, yep, there's been uptake. Now it's going to take 4 months to produce it. Let's say that it's produced overseas, right?
Correct.
So then you're not invoicing it until 4 months after market.
Correct. There's a long, in general, the point is there's a long lead time between the designer designing the product, the prototype being made, the manufacturer making the product, and then the trade show, the market itself, and the actual purchase order and so forth. And then you get paid royalties on a quarterly basis. So it's another 3 months after invoice. So we're talking about a very long lead time. Hence, when we spoke at the beginning, where you have to have a lot of patience, energy, and so forth. Because even at that first market, if you're a designer, a young designer, and you sell, for example, 100 chairs at $2,000 a piece, that's $200,000. 5% of $200,000 is $10,000, which is, I assure you, below minimum wage when you take into account on your first deal for all the time it took to design and market and so on and so forth. So once again, it's the first deal. It builds incrementally, and over 3 to 5 years or more, you have a nice portfolio that's meaningful.
So you talked. That's perfect. It actually leads me into asking you, what if goes to market and there aren't great sales, or they didn't even bring that product to market? They decided not to, and the designers now has this contract for something that isn't going to hit market. You have in your agreements some provisions that allow designers to get out of the deal if it's not being promoted in a way that they need to make sales, right?
Absolutely. That's a very good point. There are a lot of protections. This is why you need a written agreement, for example. One protection is an upfront payment. Hopefully, a designer will be able to negotiate some amount of money up front. That amount of money will be non-refundable, and it could be about even $5,000, $5,000, $10,000. that would be a very nice sum of money up front. Sometimes for a young designer or someone just entering the market, that will be the only thing they see. Because if you think about it, 5% of 10,000, that's a lot. That's a large amount of net sales. So upfront payments are very important. Now, it's not unusual for the manufacturer to say an upfront payment is an advance royalty. So I can credit royalties against this advance. That's okay. But what you want to do as a designer, make sure that only 50% of the royalty can be charged back. So the upfront payment guaranteed plus 50% of the royalty, and he makes the manufacturer some of the advance slowly.
Oh, the advance is huge. I mean, I have a friend who's a writer, and sometimes her advance is really all she gets out of the book. You know, the book does well even, but you know, it's hard to track that also for, you know, sometimes when you're dealing with an agent and fees and how many sales there really have been. So it's you're trusting in all of these other people and all these other sources to get you this money, and quite often she just relies on her upfront royalty.
Well, another safeguard perhaps is a minimum royalty guarantee, that we, the manufacturer, promise to pay you X amount of royalties whether or not we have the net sales. And that would be another nice little safeguard, and that we try to put into our agreements, which is very helpful, obviously.
Yeah, I mean, it's really about getting the manufacturer to have as much faith in you as you're putting into them, because you're willing to risk and work and before you see any reward. So they should have some skin in the game too. I can tell you, I had, you know, years before I started doing customized walls, I worked in consumable sales, and well, I more was like product person. So I'd bring a product, you know, through manufacturing all the way into marketing and then push it out, and would sometimes broker deals with major printer companies who wanted the specific product that I was working on. And I had an attorney who went through and designed my contract with the manufacturer that I got a percentage, which was 15%, I'm very happy to say. And I was allowed to have that percentage as long as they carried my product and as long as they sold my product to the clients that I worked with. And I can tell you, you know, my attorney sat with me and he went through everything and he said, you know, be careful, you know, if you budge on some of these things, especially this lifetime of the account deal, that means that at any point in time down the road, once they have the customers, once they're really happy with the sales, they can cut you out of that process or give you less, or, you know, they wouldn't have the product or the clients without you, so really stick firm on this. And I went to a meeting with the manufacturer, and I thought it was just him and I, the president of the company and he brought in 3 attorneys and 2 executives and me with my contract. I didn't even bring my attorney. And we went over line by line, and they wanted so much of it cut, so much of it taken out. And I stuck to the things that I wanted to stick to, particularly the points he said, do not cut. And, you know, I walked out of there with a lot of intimidation, but getting what I wanted. And I can say if I hadn't done that, and I have been in those positions where I haven't done that, you know, you don't have a manufacturer, I don't think, who wants to do you know, to use or use designers, but at the same time, they have attorneys too. That's the contract you're going to get is from an attorney, so it's best that you actually do have an attorney as well.
It's a business decision on both parts, and when you're thinking about the points to give up or what is the amount of the upfront payment or the advance, the manufacturer will have a business model. And you should have a business model also. In other words, they'll know the cost of the product, what the units will be sold, and how much is, and other costs and so forth. So they're figuring out with your advance and with their cost, their profit margin. Actually, very good. You have an idea of what the market's all about, so you can also gauge how much you can charge and so forth.
So should they make sure that they know what the next step is also? I mean, if they're thinking this is my stepping stone, I'm probably going to lose, I'll be working minimum wage on this first initial deal. Should they have an idea of future products and future partnerships from the get-go, like right from the beginning?
Absolutely. I mean, it's always, licensing is always about marketing products and marketing yourself. So incrementally, you're increasing your awareness of who you are in the marketplace. So always be, talking to manufacturers. Some people get agents if you're at a place where an agent wants to work with you. But always be out there talking to manufacturers, to people, going to trade shows, showing yourself. That's the time. That's the time and that you have to invest in licensing. So yeah,
okay.
Always in.
There's a terrible echo. It's fine. But I have a question for you. Can you explain to everybody what an agent is versus a lawyer, please?
Very quickly, an agent, usually what they'll do is they will, and they charge sometimes 25% up to 50% of your royalty. And their job is to find you the licensing deals. They have a lot of contacts with different manufacturers and so forth. Sometimes they will do the initial agreement and negotiate a few points. But they have to have faith enough in you. You have to be at a certain level, I think, for an agent to take you under their wing, because for them it's a time commitment and so forth. They're not a lawyer, not a lawyer in the sense that they can't obviously negotiate like a lawyer can, and they're not allowed to. But they give a lot of good advice and a lot of good service and counsel.
So let's talk about the financial aspect a little bit more for the designers that are here. One of the things that everybody has to remember, because it can be a little disheartening, and I know this has happened recently, where all of your friends are all of a sudden getting all these licensing deals, and everybody's so excited about that it's spreading all over social media. And if you're the designer that's not getting that deal, you feel like a little left out, a little like, why not me? And so, in your opinion, tell me what you think about how long a designer, what they need to think about from a family and a financial and their other business, their normal design business. What should they think about before they decide whether licensing is the right path for them or not? And before they get all upset about everybody else getting a deal and them not getting a deal.
I think we touched on this. I think you're absolutely right. I think, what is your goal? Do you think you'll get instantly rich because you're hearing Kathy Ireland is a billionaire? No, that's not going to happen. There's opportunity lost, as you mentioned, with your interior design business or whatever other business you have going. There's family issues. You'll be traveling a lot. You'll be away. There's a huge time commitment, a huge amount of energy, creative energy, as well as just being out and about. So the most important thing is to ask yourself, why am I doing this? And if the reason is because you have the people who succeed mostly, I feel, have a certain passion to get their design actually in tangible form. They want to see their design developed and manufactured. They want to sit in their chair. They want other people to sit in their chair. They want the piece showcased. They get a thrill from that. And that passion helps them get through the hard and long, time in the desert, so to speak, the 3 to 5 years until they get to the lucrative part of licensing. But you have to have that passion. If not, it's going to be tough going.
So let's talk about something else, because I know this is another thing that has come up from my friends. When you are out there as a licensee, you are reliant on a manufacturer's representatives in the marketplace to sell through your product, correct?
That's correct, oftentimes.
So part of, for everybody watching, I think part of something to really think about before you would accept an agreement from a manufacturer is to look at what is their workforce like. Do they have a workforce that can actually sell through your product? Would you agree?
That's a very, very good point. And once again, it gets back to know who your licensee is. You're the designer licensor. Know who your licensee is. Do they know your product category? every manufacturer has a reputation in the marketplace, working with retailers and the customers, and also working with designers and their licensors. If there are some really rough manufacturers out there, and we know who they are, and we deal with them accordingly. And also, there are some manufacturers who have a great name, but they have a tired sales force. That's not going to do a lot for you. Because once again, if they're not selling your product, there are no net sales, no royalties, product on the shelf, you wasted your time.
Exactly. So how would designers go about doing some, behind-the-scenes checking? Can you help them with that, Jerry?
Sure. I mean, they should speak to everyone they know, and everybody. Once again, it's a very small, it's a big industry, but it's a very intimate industry. And if you've gone to market as long as we all have, you know who the players are, you know who they are, what they do, what they can't do. Speak to people. Speak to everyone you can speak to. Networking is a wonderful thing. Everybody wants to help, so go for it.
I have a question too. Are you seeing more e-commerce licensing deals than you are, the traditional brick and mortar deals lately? Or I'm just from growing in this industry, I'm curious.
That's a very good point. I'm not seeing more, but I'm seeing a lot. Let's say that.
Okay.
It's growing at a phenomenal level. And let's step back for a second, because if you are dealing with a Wayfair or Design Within Reach, you'll be paid royalties, not on net sales perhaps, but sometimes on manufacturing cost. So just to step back, that means that they're not manufacturing the product, right? They're having someone else manufacture the product. So they're going to pay you royalties on how much it costs them to manufacture the product. So that's just a little digression. But yes, e-commerce is growing at a phenomenal pace, and that's probably a good place for a young designer to start, because they're not the e-commerce people aren't yet entrenched with their designers and licensors.
Okay, great.
Yeah,
well, it has been a wealth of information. Leslie, is there any more questions you have?
Yes, just one more on that. Let's just take that same $100,000 net sales and then $100,000 on manufacturer's cost. What would be the difference to the designer?
Yeah, good. Thank you, Leslie. Very good point. Manufacturing cost is perhaps half of net sales, meaning this: when you produce something for $1, you want to sell it for $2. So if your standard royalty on net sales is 5%, then your royalty on manufacturing cost should be incrementally higher. And that's something that you have to negotiate, and depending on leverage, you will get. But thank you, Leslie. It's a very good point. Manufacturing cost can be half of net sales.
So quickly, make sure that you see an attorney, of course, right? Because that's the very first thing you should be considering, because this will protect you. Make sure you know your product line and what segment of the market you're going to be, having licensing, because you don't want to make sure it's really specific so that you're not limiting yourself down the road. Make sure you have an out plan if it doesn't work out with the manufacturer, and make sure you really know the numbers and have a business plan overall. I mean, are those the main points that people need to be considering?
Those are several of the main points, absolutely, yes.
Jerry, is there anything else you would add at the end here that we haven't asked you?
How much time do we have?
Go ahead.
I think those are the main points. We can always follow up with another 5-hour segment. The rest of the important points in licensing, there's so many. But it's such an exciting and wonderful area to be. So I encourage designers with the passion to go for it.
Well, many of our viewers are also attendees of High Point Market. You will be at High Point Market, correct?
I will be there, of course.
Where are you going to be? Where can they track you down?
I'm going to be out and about, and they can.
I'll give you his cell phone number. Just kidding.
My email address, perhaps. Maybe we can share that somehow. But I'd love to meet and answer any questions that anyone may have. That's what I'm great. I'd like to be a resource. I'd be happy to.
Wonderful. And always make sure you go to the website, and we'll definitely have that in the descriptions of this video. Go to the website, make sure that you understand what you need to do if you're going to be considering licensing, and you're at market. You actually might be running into these deals happening. So visit Jerry and get that information before you make a bad decision. Well, thanks, everyone. Thank you, Jerry. Thank you, Leslie. Have a wonderful day. Have a wonderful weekend. And make sure you visit us back on interiordesigncommunity.com and always on Google+. And we'll see you next week. Bye.
Bye, everybody.
Bye.